In my left hand, we have the Tissot PRX Powermatic 80 35mm, and in my right, we have the 40mm. But the question is, who wins? Today, we are going to be putting these watches head to head and figuring out every single difference between these models. Welcome back to the Chisholm Hunter channel. My name is Harrison, as always, and this is another versus video where we figure out who comes out on top. And let's start with the 35mm. Let's begin with the classic. So the 35mm obviously comes in at 35mm, as you might expect, and this one in my right hand comes in at 40mm. But which one is better and why? Well, it really depends. I think, in my opinion, the 35 is just too feminine and too small for my wrists, and I have 6.5-inch wrists. It just looks a little bit too dainty. However, the 40 is just perfect, and I actually have the 40 sitting at home. I would say that the 40 is more masculine. If you have 6-inch wrists and above, you should go for the 40, but if you have maybe below 6-inch wrists and you want something that's a little bit more dainty, a little bit less, then I would go for the 35. On the 35mm Tissot PRX, the thickness comes in at roughly 10.9mm. And interestingly enough, I don't need to use the calipers for this because I actually know the specs of the 40mm. The 40mm comes in exactly the same. They both have a case thickness of 10.9mm, and that's a little bit weird to me. I would have expected from Tissot that the smaller version would have a slimmer case. It's not the worst thing in the world, but I just kind of would expect it. So I think this is 1 point to the 40mm. The length of the smaller model in my left hand comes in at 35mm, whereas the length on the bigger one, the chunkier one, comes in at 39.5mm. Again, that's kind of just personal preference. One's a lot more chunky than the other, but the real difference comes down to the weight. So let's get this in the scales. The 40mm variant comes in at roughly 140 grams. Now this is interesting because there's a huge weight difference here. The 35mm comes in at about 105. Now personally, I would always want a heavier watch. If I'm paying £610, which is what both of these watches cost, I want something substantial on my wrist. So I would want something heavier. So another point goes to the 40mm. On that note, it's interesting because on Tissot's website, it said that the 35mm comes in at 97 grams, whereas when we weigh it, it comes in at about 105, 106 grams. Either we're wrong or Tissot's wrong. The bracelet on both of these models is pretty much exactly the same, although, as you might have guessed, the 35 is that little bit smaller. Now, there's a couple of ways you can look at this. One is that smaller bracelets fit slimmer wrists better, and that is true. That's always going to be correct. However, the bracelets on these models have a quick release function at the bottom just here. And on the smaller bracelet, it's harder to get your fingernails into that quick release bracelet than the 40mm that has this more substantial bracelet. So actually, there's kind of, in my opinion, a bit of a design issue that needs to be sorted there. However, I do like the fact that they've still included that quick release function on the 35. Can't have it all. Both of these models have butterfly clasps that are non-comparable, really. They're pretty much the same. And both of them have crowns that are pretty much exactly the same size, which is interesting because I would have thought the 35 would have a more proportional crown to being a 35, but actually I prefer the look on the 35 than the 40. The 40's crown looks like a bit of an afterthought, whereas the 35 crown, in my opinion, looks quite chunky, quite substantial comparatively to the face. 35 wins here. When it comes to readability, you will be able to read these a lot better when you hit that subscribe button to the Chisholm Hunter channel. There's actually been studies that have said that it helps your eyesight. Readability-wise, these are both highly, highly readable, and I wouldn't say that the 35 is any less readable than the 40 comparatively. They both have pretty perfect proportions and pretty perfect sort of applied indices and markers. They are all very readable. I wouldn't say there's really a comparison there, but what I would say there is a comparison in is the date window. The date window remains the same size on each model, even though this is a smaller face, which kind of, in my opinion, makes the 35 look more proportional than the 40. Both of these models have the Powermatic 80 movement that gives this watch 80 hours of power, and it's of course an ETA mass-produced movement. I've said in tons of other reviews, just because it's an ETA does not mean it's a bad movement. There's not really a comparison there because they're exactly the same. The dial colors on these watches they're interesting. They're very interesting. In fact, you can see them all on the Chisholm Hunter website. We're official stockists of these watches. That's not even a plug. It's just have a look because they are very cool. What I would say is you've probably got a little bit more diversity amongst the 40mm PRX, but that's just because the 35 is so new. I reckon if you give it a year, 2 years, you'll probably find that it catches up with where the 40 is at the moment in terms of color ranges. However, at the moment, you do have more colors in the 40mm range. And also within that 40mm, you do have the ice blue, which is stunning. The question is, who wins this versus video? Now, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you'll know that somebody has to win the versus video. And normally I pick a winner, and I will pick a winner, but give me 2 secs to just explain my choice and also explain why you shouldn't be influenced by my decision. I'm here to teach you, and I'm here to point you in the right direction. But I'm not here to lecture you on what's good and what's bad because everything in this industry is subjective. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. All of these watches are beautiful. The 35 and the 40 and the whole PRX range. But I do think the 40 is more justified. They both come in at the same price, despite the fact you get more metal in the 40. I mean, you're kind of paying for the movement, essentially, which is brilliant in both, but you kind of get what I mean. Plus, it suits my bigger wrists, and I am biased. I do own one. I go with the 40. Thank you so much for watching this Chisholm Hunter video. If you enjoyed, please hit that subscribe button or follow our Instagram, Chisholm Hunter Watches. I'll see you next time.